All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as you have already heard, I'm doing a series of video presentations that are based off of the ebooks written by Mr. Flavio Copes. And I'm doing this with the hope that it's going to help people in the AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies and the AWD 1111 Database-Driven Websites classes. All right, so I am done Mr. Copes' whole HTML book, and I'm finishing up now with the CSS book. Got about 25 pages left out of the 173 pages in here. So the next three sections are all kind of related to one another. They talk about transforms, transitions, and animations. And as mentioned here, transforms let you translate, rotate, scale, and skew things to give you some cool looking types of features. As you can see there, transform accepts a lot of different functions, and there's some access specific functions as well. And as it says, here's an example of a transform, which changes a box element width by 2 and the height by 5. All right, so it sounds like it's going to duplicate it, but also cut it the size in half. It'll take up the same space, but there'll be two of them. You can combine multiple transforms doing something like this. You can do those. The first one was shown in 2D. They can always also do them in 3D. Now, when you talk 3D, when you talk 2D, you've got an x-axis, all right, which is your vertical axis. You've got a y-axis, or is it backwards? I guess X is your horizontal axis, Y is your vertical axis. But with 3D, you've also got a Z axis, which, as it says, adds depth for your visuals. All right. Now, transitions, on the other hand, as mentioned right here, they're the simplest way to create animations. You change the value of a property and you tell CSS to slowly change it according to parameters that you specify till you get to a final desired state. All right, and as it says, transitions are defined by the properties shown. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see them right there. So here's an example. All right. So you got 1, 3, 2, 4 and a circle hover. It says, see the example on glitch. There it is. You can see when you put your mouse on anyone, you get the little desired effect there. All right. Now, I've said this before. I've said this in the classroom. I don't know if I've said it in these series of tapes that I'm making or not, but to me, it's worth repeating, and that is, when you're doing this stuff, never let the medium overpower the message. In other words, you can make some really cool looking stuff with animations, transitions, etc. But if all people remember is that stuff, and they don't end up remembering what your site is about, you're doing yourself probably more harm than you are good. All right. There's different ways that you can ease in and ease out of stuff. It says the dev tools offer a way for you to visualize transitions. There's the way you can show it in Chrome. There's the way you can show it in Firefox. All right. Which properties you can animate using the CSS animations. There's a part of the list right there. And it goes on to the next page here. And it goes on again to the next page. And to the page after that. Okay, and that gets us into actually talking about animations. As it says, CSS animations provide a great way to create visual animations. They can be as simple as you need them to be or as complex. Back in the day, I remember when I used to use a product called WordPerfect, And probably the only kind of animation you could get was you had this little guy that got created, and you could sort of make it look like he walked. All right. An animation is mentioned there is applied to an element using the animation property. All right. In this example, spin is the name of the animation. It says we also tell CSS to make the animation how long to last. That's the 10s, or 10 seconds. Perform it in a linear manner. In other words, it should have the same speed throughout. You can do easing types of things where you make it start fast and slow down, or you can make it start slow and speed up, etc. This is saying to do none of that. And the infinite means it'll repeat infinitely. So as it says, you must define how your animation works using what are called keyframes. Inside of the keyframes, you can have as many of these things in here as you want to or need to have. So they give an example here. It says, I want to draw 4 circles with a starting point in common, all 90 degrees distant from each other. So I'm not going to run through the example. You can see it in here. All right, and they set it up, and there's the keyframes. It says you can see this example. This is the same one we looked at before, except now it's moving. See that? You can make it move in both directions. Thought you could. Maybe it only moves in one direction. Oh, there it goes. All right. Here are the CSS animation properties. As it says, it offers a lot of parameters you can tweak. There are some more. JavaScript events for CSS animations, as mentioned there. Using JavaScript, you can listen for certain animation events and then act on them accordingly or programmatically using JavaScript. Which properties you can animate using animations? Again, there's part of the list, there's some more, and a little bit more. All right. Okay, next they talk about normalizing. Now, when you normalize, there's actually several different files that you can use for this, just so you know. And one of them, there is a normalize.css file. And that's it right here. When you download it, what's going to happen is, let's see. I'll tell you what, I'll download it. There it is. What it does is it tries to make sure that regardless of the browser that you're using, you're basically removing all of the browser defaults for margin padding and things like that, sizing, etc. Now, there's nothing wrong with using that. It works very well. I've used it before. The other one that's used a lot is the Eric Myers CSS reset. All right, and that's right here. Okay, or you can go out to a site and download it as well. And if you don't want to use either one of those, sometimes you use the universal selector where you actually come in and you start something with an asterisk. And that's pretty much then what it does. So there's different ways that you can set this stuff up. As it says, if you're going to use that, you must put the normalizing file or the Eric Myers or your own, if you write your own, put those before any other CSS. So if you've got your own CSS file and you're using the universal selector, put that at the top. All right, CSS is resilient. When it finds an error, it does not act like JavaScript. CSS tries hard to do what you want. If a line has an error, it skips it and jumps to the next line without any error. If you forget a semicolon on one line, the line with the error and the next one will not be applied, but the next one will be. You've already seen that. I showed it to you earlier. So sometimes it's tricky to realize there is an error someplace. That's why there are tools like CSS Okay, so you can put your CSS in there and lint it to see if it works okay. There's also a CSS validator. There are several of them, but the one that it's used most often is at jigsaw.w3.org. All right. And it works just like the CSS, or I'm sorry, just like the HTML validator. All right. Typically what I do is I go in by direct input, grab all my code, put it in there, and press check. And if it comes up green in this case, green is good, and you'll even get a little symbol that tells you that everything is cool. So for instance, if I came in here and I went back to my code that I had over here before in my styles, and there isn't much in here. Well, let's see. Let's see if we take out and put back in everything that we had in here, just everything. Don't ask me why I'm doing this, because I don't know. So there's about 140 lines there, give or take. And if I come back in and put those in here and press check, you'll notice that it says, it validates. And I get this little thing, basically the seal of approval, so to speak. All right. In much the same way, and this is a little off topic, but it doesn't hurt to go over it quickly, is I can go to my index file here. And again, I can come here and try to grab all of the CSS, all of the HTML that I put in here before. And you'll notice now we've got what? About 265 lines. And just like before, I can come back in here and I can put down HTML validator. And this is the one, it's validator.w3.org. It's just like the other one, except this one has no jigsaw in it. Validate, put in my code, click check. Now, if it has errors, I'm going to know right away. There you go. So it's giving me some errors. So there's some stuff in here. Looks like 9 errors that it doesn't like. All right. So for instance, I put for the table border, putting in their border equal 1, I shouldn't have done that. All right. So it says line 211. Well, the good news is it's pretty far down in here already. So I can get rid of that. Now, I don't think it'll let me get rid of it here. Oh, it does. Good. Delete. So that's fixed. So I fixed that. It doesn't like those. Oh, I've got a non-breaking space that doesn't have. Right there doesn't have a semicolon in it. So that's a couple of them. There's a stray end tag on line 222. So there's a T head that's there by itself. There's the T head. Well, I'll tell you what, let's grab this. I've got it all now. Let's check it. And you'll see that it went down from 9 errors to 7 errors. Okay, I'm not going to do any more. You get the idea, or at least hopefully you get the idea of what's going on here. Vendor prefixes are an interesting concept. Remember, you've got caniuse.com, but there are features that are being added all the time. It should be mentioned that when WattWG and the W3C, when they come up with new things for CSS, all right, and for HTML, these are recommendations. These are not orders. They're not edicts. They cannot come down and say, you've got to do it like this. It just doesn't work like that. They make recommendations that by and large, every major browser manufacturer says, okay, and they do it. All right, they allow you to do it. All right. So it says you can't ship a feature unless you're sure you can push all your visitors. Well, here's an example. You get WebKit, there's Firefox, there's Microsoft, there's Opera, And WebKit, I believe, is for both Safari and Chrome. Now, the idea is hopefully over time, you'll notice this is for everything. The idea is hopefully over time, all of these will go away. You won't need any of these anymore. They'll all be replaced with just this one. But if you're not sure if something will be handled by the particular browser manufacturer, you'll typically add that. All right. CSS for print, it says, the key thing to realize for print is, well, first of all, let's assume that you're not using a color printer. You could be, but let's assume you're not. All right. You might want to go and set the color for every image and everything that you're working on to black and white. You might not even want to print images. So your CSS for print will typically be a very scaled down. So if somebody comes out and wants to print the site, you won't print out everything. It says some common things you might want to do when printing is to hide some parts of the document, maybe the footer, maybe the header, maybe the sidebar, etc. And again, as I mentioned, maybe some, most, all of the images, depending. All right, an alternative to doing that is to do that with a media query, media print. It says when printing, you might lose a lot of information. CSS offers a way to solve this problem, appending the link after the A tag using something like this. All right, so if somebody wants to be able to follow it, to know exactly where it went to. Remember, if you've got it online, of course, you can click on it, but if you're printing it out, you can't. You can add margins to every page. Okay, you can set up where you want page breaks to happen so it looks more professional. As it says, you want to avoid breaking your pages in the middle. Doesn't look very professional, doesn't act very professional. All right. The Chrome DevTools, as it says, offers ways to emulate the print output layout so you can take a look at it, see if it looks exactly the way you want it to look. And that's it. All right. So when I come back again, because I'm pretty much done with this one, the next thing I'm going to go over is the JavaScript Beginner's Handbook. 70 pages. And then I'm going to follow that with the E5 to ES Next. 84 pages. So those two together are less than what I just covered. And I hope to do that next. Be back shortly.